Okay, let's jump right into this explainer and explore how a rearing cobra sitting right on a pharaoh's head became one of history's absolute most enduring symbols of power. Honestly, you've probably seen this icon hundreds of times, right? It's front and center on the golden death mask of King Tutankhamun, it's etched deep into those massive stone pillars of Karnak, and yeah, it's constantly replicated in literally every Hollywood movie about ancient Egypt. But what we're looking at here is so much more than just ancient fashion. Today, we're going to unpack exactly why the Uraeus was so deeply vital to the ancient world and how its influence actually reaches way further into our modern lives than you might think.
Here's our quick roadmap for today. We'll start with the symbol of sovereignty, then look at unifying the two lands, followed by the golden crown jewel, the cobra in code, and finally, we'll trace its journey from pharaohs to angels.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the symbol of sovereignty itself. To understand the power of this icon, we really have to decode what it actually meant to the people back then.
So the word Uraeus actually comes from the ancient Egyptian word for rearing cobra. It represents the highly stylized, upright form of an Egyptian cobra, caught right at that terrifying moment when it's ready to strike. Now, to truly grasp the gravity of this symbol, you have to realize this wasn't just some royal accessory or a cool piece of jewelry. No, it was the absolute non-negotiable marker of a ruler's legitimacy. Think about it. If a usurper somehow managed to take the throne, but they didn't have the Uraeus, the people just wouldn't recognize them as the true pharaoh. The right to rule the land, to command the armies, and to speak for the gods was literally bound to having this specific serpent on your forehead. It was basically the ancient world's ultimate verification badge.
The whole origin of this intense symbolism actually starts with Wadjet. She was an early Egyptian deity and the fierce, incredibly devoted patroness and protector of Lower Egypt. Now, picture the geography of Lower Egypt for a second. We're talking about the lush, fertile, super vibrant Nile Delta, right? It was absolutely teeming with wildlife. In that kind of dense environment, a deadly hidden cobra was a perfectly fitting and frankly terrifying guardian. Her main center of worship was a place the Greeks later called Budo, and because she was the protectress of this whole vital region, her blessing was the absolute prerequisite for any pharaoh who wanted to claim the land. So wearing her image, whether she was coiled right on top of the head or encircling the whole crown, signaled her direct, unwavering protection. It completely reinforced the pharaoh's total claim over the region to anyone who even thought about questioning it.
And here is where the mythology gets really wild. The cobra wasn't just sitting up there passively watching, it was an active, lethal guardian. You see, as Egyptian theology evolved, pharaohs weren't just seen as kings anymore. They were recognized as the living manifestations of the sun god Ra. With that massive theological upgrade, the Uraeus took on even crazier protective duties. It was believed to be a divine active weapon. Basically, imagine it as the ancient equivalent of a divine laser beam. The mythology literally stated that this rearing cobra would protect the king by spitting actual fire onto his enemies, channeling the blistering, intense heat of the sun directly from the fiery eye of Ra.
Moving into our second section, let's talk about what happens when the politics of ancient Egypt undergo a massive shakeup.
So eventually, Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt were finally unified under one single ruler. Huge milestone, right? But this created a massive political headache. You've got these two deeply distinct regions, and each of them has their own fiercely defended patron gods. In one corner, you have Wadjet, our terrifying cobra goddess of Lower Egypt. In the other, you have Nekhbet, the incredibly powerful white vulture goddess of Upper Egypt. When you force two rival nations together like this, you can't just toss out one half of the country's protective deity without sparking massive unrest or, a literal religious civil war. Both of these cults were rich, super influential, and way too deeply rooted to just merge into one diluted god.
The solution they came up with, it was honestly a brilliant piece of visual diplomacy. They just joined forces. Once the lands unified, these two distinct goddesses became known collectively as the Nepti, which translates to the two ladies. If you look at the crowns of the pharaohs from this newly unified Egypt, you'll frequently see Wadjet the cobra and Nekhbid the vulture sitting right there side by side. They became the joint protectors of the entire unified state. The key takeaway here is that by slapping both deities on the crown, the pharaoh was essentially wearing a peace treaty on their head every single day. It was a constant visual reminder to the citizens of both Upper and Lower Egypt that they were equally valued and protected.
Now, this protective power was never more crucial than during times of war. Here, we see the Uraeus associated with the famous blue crown. Before the New Kingdom period, the body of the Uraeus was usually depicted heavily coiled in circles right behind its raised, striking head. But pause for a second and think about the intense paradox of a pharaoh at war. The pharaoh is supposed to be an immortal, living god, but out on the actual battlefield, gods can bleed. Because this deity on Earth needed extra psychological and physical protection in his vulnerable mortal form, kings were most often shown wearing this specific blue crown, with the Uraeus, during or immediately after combat. That aggressive, coiled posture of the snake, it acted as a psychological weapon, basically a terrifying promise of divine wrath aimed directly at anyone brave enough to face them in battle.
Let's shift gears for Section 3 and ground all of this rich, epic mythology into a tangible physical discovery.
Back in 1919, an excavation was happening to clear out the rooms of the El Lahun Pyramid at Saqqara. Picture this, a dark, dusty, rock-cut offering chamber that hasn't been disturbed for thousands of years. It had literally been hidden for millennia. But it took a crafty worker named Hasni Ibrahim a mere 30 minutes of digging through just 6 inches of debris to hit the absolute jackpot. He unearthed the stunning golden Uraeus of Senusret II. I mean, this was the ultimate archaeological lottery ticket. What makes this find so historically explosive is that before Howard Carter famously opened King Tut's tomb in 1922, this golden Uraeus was the only ornament of its kind ever known to be worn by an entombed pharaoh.
Imagine holding this thing. It's a piece of solid gold no larger than your thumb. At just 6.7 centimeters long, so about 2.5 inches, the exquisite craftsmanship here is just staggering. Take a look at this table. It has a solid gold body designed to perfectly catch the flickering light of temple torches. It has these pucing, unblinking black granite eyes. The snake's head is carved from deep, striking ultramarine lapis lazuli, and that flared, threatening hood, it's meticulously inlaid with fiery dark carnelian and bright turquoise. But beyond just being pure luxury, it's an absolute marvel of ancient engineering. The goldsmiths actually built 2 tiny loops seamlessly into the rear supporting tail of the cobra. Those loops provided the exact secure attachment points they needed to mount this heavy jewel directly onto the fabric of the pharaoh's crown.
All right, moving on to Section 4, the cobra in code. As it turns out, the Uraeus wasn't just physical propaganda. It was literally woven into the DNA of their written language. In hieroglyphics, the symbol of the rearing cobra was incredibly versatile. Think of it kind of like a modern verification badge, or maybe a specialized emoji that instantly changes the context of whatever word comes right before it. Depending on exactly where it was placed, the cobra could represent a whole hierarchy of meanings. It could elevate a basic word to mean a generic goddess or a high priestess. It could point to specific, super powerful deities like Menhit or Isis. It was even used as a modifier added to the hieroglyph for a physical shrine, literally transforming the written word for a simple building into a space of absolute divine sacredness. We can actually see this linguistic superpower perfectly deployed on arguably the most famous code-breaking artifact in human history, the Rosetta Stone. The stone uses this really fascinating plural hieroglyph showing 3 god flags, and each one has a distinct cobra situated right at its base. In the text of the stone, right where the king is rigorously listing off all his reasons for being honored, they use this specific grouping of Uraeus symbols. The cobra is acting as the ultimate grammatical seal of divine approval, basically communicating that the collective gods and goddesses of the land are actively rewarding him.
And that brings us to our final section, from pharaohs to angels. Let's look at how this icon managed to outlive the very civilization that created it.
You know, empires eventually fall, but truly powerful branding, that survives. The visual vocabulary of Egyptian divine power didn't just vanish when their kingdom declined, it migrated. The symbol spread like wildfire, and archaeologists have actually found amulets featuring multiple winged uraei spreading well beyond the borders of Egypt. They've been found prominently represented in the neighboring land of Israel, for example. This geographical shift is profoundly significant. It proves that rival nations and neighboring cultures were actively absorbing and reinterpreting this very specific image of power. The Uraeus had essentially become a universal language for divine authority across the ancient world.
And here is where the evolution of this symbol gets truly mind-bending. The angelic beings, known as the seraphim, which are found throughout the Hebrew Bible, as well as in later Jewish, Christian, and Islamic traditions, are frequently and explicitly associated with serpents. In fact, the word seraphim literally translates to burning ones or serpents. Because of this super direct linguistic and visual connection, scholars widely believe that these 6-winged angelic beings are directly derived from the ancient concept of the Uraeus. I mean, let that sink in for a moment. The fire-spitting, winged guardian cobra of the desert pharaohs didn't just disappear.
It evolved across centuries and across sacred texts, eventually transforming into the fiery angels of the Abrahamic faiths we recognize today.
So, it leaves us with this fascinating final thought. How do ancient symbols of absolute power evolve to transcend the empires that birthed them, ultimately shaping our modern spiritual beliefs? It just goes to show you, the empires of the ancient world may have crumbled to dust long ago, but their symbols, they just grew wings.